Welcome back to the Everything Property Podcast. Now, we are exploring some different ways and forms of property you can buy as part of your investment strategy, but how do you actually buy them? Well, one way and is everyone's favorite, the old pressure cooker, the auction. Who better to get on the Everything Property Podcast than Australia's #1 auctioneer? He sold more houses at auction than I've had baked dinners. He started his auction company 20 years ago, and now him and his team are responsible for having conducted over 75,000 auctions. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. In the early days, there was some serious graft and effort, and we will get to this point and unpack it in a bit more detail today. But going once, going twice, Damien Cooley, the bid is with you. Welcome to the Everything Property Podcast.
I was going to say, if you said sold, you needed to say 3 times.
Oh, there you go. Look, terminology. Oh, look, if anyone doesn't know and hasn't seen him, he's been on the block. He's the best property auctioneer in the country. Damien, I want to sort of dig a little bit into, I sort of know a little bit about your early days, and it's interesting because I feel like that I can see how it's transformed into who you are now and having run your business for 20 years. So tell me a little bit about Damien Cooley at high school.
Okay. I went to boarding school,
Yep.
St Gregory's College in Campbelltown.
Mm-hmm. You were living on site
on
there?
campus, yep. So I was a boarder. I went there in year 8. I loved boarding school. It was a great experience. I loved being around my mates all the time. St. Greg's was a very strong rugby league school. I was absolutely hopeless at rugby league. But I loved being a boarder. I met a lot of country boys.
Yep.
And when I left school and got into real estate, I actually went and did a little bit of jackarooing later before I opened Cooley, the business that we are in now. And so I've got a lot of country affiliations with friends and family that live out in the bush.
Yeah.
And we've got a little farm down in the Highlands too. Yeah,
I've seen that. Look, okay, so tell me, why do you like that boarding on site as well? You're quite young, you're in year 8.
Yep.
You're almost responsible for not only like your own life there, but like it's you. You don't have your parents around or anything like that. So do you feel like that sort of set you up for the rest of your life and that's how it played out?
Yeah, look, you learn to grow up pretty quickly, and you're taught strong values that you carry through the rest of your life. I was quite active in the school, and I wasn't a real sporty kid, but I was always active in sport. I tried everything, and I tried my best at most things that I did. Yeah. And one thing that I did well at school was I loved business studies. I loved agriculture. I was a public speaking and debating captain, which at the time was a really nerdy thing to do. And I wasn't the cool kid in that sense, but I was always well respected at school, and I was a prefect, etc. But I think that public speaking and debating, I was a natural speaker. Yeah. I always enjoyed getting up in front of a crowd. One thing that a lot of people don't know about me is that when I was actually at school, I went in a couple of wool classing competitions.
Okay.
Fleece judging.
Yep.
And I actually won the Australian Junior Novice Fleece Judging Championship. And I went to the Sydney Royal Easter Show, which is timely because the Sydney show's on right now.
Yeah.
I won the Sydney show, then went to the Adelaide show, and I won that. But I think what set me apart between a lot of the country kids is that I could talk. And not only did you had to put these 4 fleeces in order, first, second, third, and fourth, you then had to give a description as to why you put them in that order.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that's where I excelled, was I held a microphone and I was able to talk in front of a large audience, whereas some of the other kids might have been a bit nervous.
And where do you think that comes from?
The confidence?
The confidence to pick it up.
Mum and Dad always thought I was a pretty cheeky little kid, I was quite confident.
Extrovert, out there, a bit loud.
Yeah, nothing really bothered me too much. I wasn't embarrassed to speak to people or shake someone's hand so.
I feel like that's a bit of like the country way of living and how people are when they're from not from the bush but from the country. It's just like you got to get along with each other. Like you come from these small towns, these small areas, and it's like you got to be out there, you got to be talking to people and that kind of stuff. Tell me, St. Greg's finishes up the transition out of high school, and then we'll get into sort of how you fell into property, but like tell me how that transition was of Damien Cooley coming out of high school from being a boarder and tertiary study or anything like that, going for a job. What happens next?
I Dad was a lawyer. My older brother, Michael, was a lawyer. Law was been in the family. I got out of school and I was going to university.
Yep.
I did well at school. I got over 90, but I didn't get enough to get into a straight law degree.
Yep.
So I had to go and do a straight arts degree to try and transfer later after 12 months, I think,
Yep.
into doing arts law. I hated university. I was there for like 1 week, max 2 weeks, and I was like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So I remember going home and telling Dad that I was getting out of university. He wasn't impressed.
Yeah. Because tell me about the. I feel like your parents was there the expectation that you were going in, going out, going to.
They make a big investment into your schooling, and as a parent now, and I've got 3 kids and 3 kids at private school, they don't miss you. I'll give you the tip. So you want to see your kids succeed, and you'd like to see the investment that you make in your children, in their education and their schooling, come to fruition.
Yep.
So it wasn't the plan that my parents had for me, but it was the plan that I ended up having for myself.
Yep.
And I did fall, like you said, I did actually fall into real estate a little bit in that sense, where Mum had a friend of hers that was in property, in real estate, and they owned a company called Elders Real Estate in Randwick, and that was my first job. I actually wrote them a letter as to why they should employ me, and I'm embarrassed to say that I can't find that letter anywhere.
Yeah, maybe you're lucky you can't.
Well, no, you know what? Rob Anderson, my boss, actually gave it to me one day, and he said, Dame, after I'd been in business for like 10 years, he said, I got to show you this letter, and I cannot find the thing. But even when I read it back, I was like, I would employ that kid.
Yeah,
like I would employ him because I was confident. I knew what I wanted to do, and I started working at Elders, and I was there in property management. I did leasing and working in the property industry, and I really enjoyed watching the auctioneers who were selling for the company that I was auctioning for. And I thought to myself, maybe I should get into the auctioneering space.
And tell me just quickly, your parents, obviously they had that goal and that dream for you, but I feel like when they see you run off, when they see you go off and do something that you want to do good at, and then maybe see you doing well, how long does it take them to sort of realize and be like, you know what, he's going at it, like we're happy, we're proud of him now, even though it's not what they wanted for you?
Yeah, look, mum and dad were always incredibly proud. And whilst I say it wasn't the vision that they had for me, they were always very supportive of the decisions that we made. You know, it was an exciting time. It was an exciting time when I first got into real estate, and you're young, you think you know a lot, and you'll soon work out that you don't know much at all. And I'm probably going to look back in 10 years' time and say, oh, gee, I thought at 43, which is what I am now, I thought I knew everything then, and now I know a lot more at 50 or 60.
Mm-hmm. And you're probably still learning now as you
Absolutely.
go every single day. Okay, and then sort of talk to me through the auction journey and working from home in the suit and all that kind of stuff. And,
you've done your research.
Yeah, hey, I'm not here to muck about, but yeah, talk to me about like newspaper clippings and how sort of that gets a roll on, because I feel like a lot of young people at the moment might get shot down for this, but like are pretty entitled with how they want to work, their work conditions. But I feel like what's different about you is that you sort of come out, you went after it, and you've attacked it. And I think maybe a good little tip for anyone that wants to work with you is the handwritten note. But I think like that thinking, that way of approaching the matter is just sort of like that roll-on effect of like you being responsible for your own destiny. You're not relying on mum and dad. You're like, I got to get out here and do it. You've showed your initiative. You've then moved into, property management and then sort of auctioneering. Talk to me about sort of like the work ethic and how you built that up.
So when I first went out and opened Cooley, I mean, it's a pretty lonely space. I'm in a 2-bedroom unit on my own.
Yeah.
And I had a flatmate, but I was basically working from home, and I would get dressed every single day, and I'd put a suit on, whether I didn't really have meetings, or I'd pretend that I had a meeting or something. But I would go and meet agents. Yep. And at the time when I first started 20 years ago, the average age of the auctioneer was a lot older than I was. So I was like that new kid, young, exciting, very energetic. And it was difficult in the sense that it was against the norm employing me to do an auction opposed to employing somebody who's really experienced. I would often turn up to a house and the owners would look at me and say to the agent, is that the auctioneer? Because I was 23 years old when I started my business. I felt old at the time though, like I didn't feel young. And I always used to say to people, you know, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And I used to say, like, don't judge me by how I look. Let me know what you think after I finish.
Yeah,
so I'd do the auction, and I always brought a lot of energy and enthusiasm to my auction call, and I still have that same attitude today. And owners would often come up to me after the auction and congratulate me. You know, a great friend and mentor of mine, Matt LaHood, who works for the agency. Matt, I did one of my first few auctions for Matt.
I was going to say, tell me the first couple, because you would have been so nervous, you know, calling your first like proper auction.
At the time, this is actually before I started Cooley, but at the time I was working for McGrath Estate Agents, and the chief auctioneer at the time, Scott Kennedy Green, had to beg Matt LaHood to give me this property to auction. Yeah. And I remember it was like a 2-bedroom unit in Dolphin Street, Coogee. Yeah. And I think good spot. I think we sold it for about 500 and something thousand, which at the time was big money. And Matt was really impressed with how I did, and then continued to give me more auctions. So I guess my business plan at the time was get my foot in the door, even if I had to do the auction for nothing, just get my foot in the door and then let my ability do the talking. Let my ability and my enthusiasm and what I bring to the auction room floor, let that do the talking, and that will get me more business. And I grew very quickly. In my first year of auctions, I think I did 385 auctions. Second year, about 600 odd.
Is this as an auctioneer or after you started Cooley?
When I started Cooley.
Which was all 300 first year.
358 or 398. I forget now, actually, to be honest.
Auction a day, yeah.
Yeah, but so I was doing good volume, and then over 1,000, over 2,000, and then the numbers continued.
Okay, whoa, Jesus. Okay, I didn't realize that you actually started on such a. I feel like that's a pretty good ballpark to start at. I mean, to have over an auction a day for the first year of business, you've done really well.
If I could get an auctioneer to come into our team now in year one, do what I did in year one, I'd be absolutely stoked.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is not easy. The market also is now. It's certainly not flooded, but there is a lot more choice, and there's more people who have come into the industry, and real estate agents and owners do have choice. And I think that's one thing that's probably important to talk about, is that when you're selling your home, you do have a choice who's going to be doing your auction. Agents have affiliations with individual auctioneers or companies, and they will push their own agenda. But I think as somebody who's selling your house, like, it is important to do your research on who you want to be standing out the front of your home or in a room calling your auction, because they do make a difference.
100%. So talk to me. You started that back in 2003.
Yep.
What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in 20 odd years, 20 plus years of business now, growing it from a one-man band in a 2-bedroom in the eastern suburbs to a team of how many auctioneers at the moment?
Look, we've got 12, 13 full-time auctioneers, but we have another sort of 5 or 7 contractors that work with us. What
are some of your biggest lessons of business over the years?
I think a few things. Be careful of what you spend money on. I've put a lot of money into different things, some of which have been outstanding. Yep. Some haven't been so good. I'm talking about just business investment, not investing in property, or I'm talking about what you spend your money on as a director of a company to try and grow your business. I always put a huge emphasis on our marketing. I always put a huge emphasis on the media. I spent a lot of time working with individual journalists and the media in general. People often say to me, who's the PR company that you use to get your name out there? I go, mate, he's standing right in front of him. This is the PR company right here. Yeah. Because I like making those phone calls. I used to have a meeting in my calendar every week saying media hour, and I'd make those phone calls. So lessons for me were making sure that I was always on, making sure that, you're going to have off days. You're going to have times where you don't feel so great. But probably the biggest lesson that I've learned over my 20 years is that if I feel good about myself, everything else falls into place. And so I do more work working on myself than I necessarily do working on the business. And that's with my health, the way I feel, the way I look, what I eat, all that sort of stuff. And I have had times where that's gone completely off the rails and off track. But
do you find that reflects in business then?
Absolutely.
When that goes off the track?
Absolutely. Yep. There is a direct correlation between how you feel and how you feel when you turn up for work and your output at work.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're best ever year of auctions in a year. You were running marathons and you were doing.
I think
like
in
you were fit.
2015, I did Melbourne Ironman. And when I do something, like I train hard for it.
Yeah.
Like I was 20 hours a week training.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was my best year of auctions.
Okay, so just one Melbourne Marathon. What else you doing that year?
I did Gold. I think I did Gold Coast Marathon that year, probably City to Surf, and I did Melbourne Ironman. I mean, that's Ironman's a pretty significant event, and it's not. Look, whenever I commit to an event, it's the event is the celebration of the training. So for me, it's always about, okay, I just want to get to the start line and have a fair income conversation with myself in my head and say, you're ready to go. That's it. If I can't get to the start line and say, you have done the work, then I'm going to race shit. But if I can get to the start line and say, mate, you've done the work, I'm going to have a great race because I just trust the training.
And it reflects I assume you have the same principles and strategy when it comes to business, right?
So exactly the same. If I've made the phone calls, if I've prospected hard the clients that I have and chasing new business, if I've spoken to my media contacts, if I feel good about myself every day, if my marketing's right, that means I'm going to do a good job at the auction. That means when that person wants to sell that house in 5 years' time or 7 years' time, they're going to ask me. It's word of mouth referral. It's getting out there and getting after it. Like you said in the early days, I used to get a newspaper clipping out of the Wentworth Courier or the Southern Courier at the time, and I'd cut a paper out of the Courier, which would have a photo of a house and the real estate agent's marketing, and I'd write a handwritten note to that agent, and I'd post it to them in the mail, and they would receive it. And I wasn't doing the auction, but it would just be along the lines of, hi, Peter, house looks great. Congratulations on the listing. Hope the auction goes really well. If you ever can't get your auctioneer at your preferred date and preferred time, I'd be thrilled if you thought of me, Damien Cooley.
Jesus.
Yeah. So that was just, and if repetition, right? Like if I keep doing it, then the next week I'll phone them. Then the following week I'll shoot them an email. Nothing beats the handwritten notes are the best, because in today's day and age where, everything's social or everything's email or, it's a phone, text message, people don't even like calling people anymore. It's like, how can I quickly get a message out and not have to talk to this person? So I like the handwritten note because it feels a lot more personable. And I think people really like it.
Definitely, and I think it's preparation and process, and then I think the score takes care of itself at the end. Right?
It's the old 7 Ps.
That's
Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Got it in once. Nailed it. Well, look, talk to me, building up the business, and then you start to hit the block and you start to get recognised on TV, and then you're invited back and back and back and back. And so how did originally the first appearance come around, and how did that all work?
I've got a lot to thank for the block. I think that really catapulted my career.
Yep.
James Economides, who's a real estate agent for Elders Manly at the time. In fact, I only saw James just about a few weeks ago, and we had this very conversation. He said a very young Damien Cooley, he heard that there was a young auctioneer in the Elders network kicking some goals, and he wanted to find out who that was. So I rang James and I said, come on, mate, put me on the job. Let's smash it. Apparently were my exact words. So that was the block Manly, and we won that. I've been on the block about 12 times, and we've won it 5 times. I feel like we probably could have won it maybe 1 or 2 more times, just different circumstances. The block is
auction order and stuff like
auction
that.
Order, a sale. All things. Frankly, they're all excuses. You're either win it or you don't. And I'm not an excuse person, so I guess from my own point of view, I take responsibility for, decisions that you make during auctions or how you try and get people to get to a number. The Block is an amazing TV show. It's great reality. It's done so wonders for my career. And I have loved auctioning on the block. Not sure that I'll be going back on the block. For me, I think, I've done it 12 times. I've had a pretty good run at it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's time for me to hang the boots up.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, if people don't know who you are and what you do by now, then, they're not going to see you after the 13th. But, all right, well, look, let's dive into a little bit around the auctioneering process. And because that's one of the ways that you can purchase homes in all of the states. But run us quickly through through auction terms. What happens on the day? What are the legally binding terms, cooling off, all that kind of thing? What's the auction process?
Look, there are a lot of similarities, but most states have their own kind of terms and conditions. If we look at New South Wales specifically, New South Wales, if you're bidding on a residential property, you need to register to bid for that property, whereas in Victoria, you don't have to register. So in New South Wales, you get a bidder's registration number. On the block, you see them holding paddles and things, and they do register them there, but it's not a requirement to register in Victoria.
Interesting.
It is in Queensland, it is in New South Wales, and it is in ACT and other states. So you get a bidder's registration number. You need to bid with that card every time that you bid. In New South Wales, when you purchase a property at auction, what that actually means is that you are waiving any cooling off rights. So when you buy the property and the hammer comes down and it's sold to you, you're committed to purchasing that property. You then need to sign a contract. You generally pay a deposit. It's 10%, but most people request a 5% deposit these days, given the fact that property prices are so unbelievably high.
They're only going one way too.
Yeah. You got to register. Commercial property, I've just come from 4 commercial auctions that I did this morning, and you don't have to register for those. You can just bid. It's a little bit more a little bit of the Wild West in the commercial space than it is in the residential space. But I guess essentially when registrations actually first came in, they brought them in an attempt to stamp out dummy bidding and people bidding illegally at auctions, and they wanted to have a physical record of every person who registered to bid for the property, and they wanted to see every single bid that was placed during the auction. And that's done absolutely wonders for our industry. It's the best form of transparency. And I constantly talk to Victorians and say, I can't believe you guys aren't registering.
Yeah, why is that? Do you know?
Well, I don't know.
They're a bit different down there. Let's be honest. The blocker side, the Victorians are a bit different.
I can't argue with the fact that they sell a lot of real estate, and they're very most of them are very good. So I've got a lot of respect for the Victorians.
Fair enough. What about vendor bidding?
Yep.
Do you want to really explain a little bit how that works? And what if an auction ends and the highest bid's the vendor bid?
Yep. So, again, in New South Wales, you're allowed one. In Victoria, you can have as many as you like. Look, we would always only ever encourage one. I think, maybe having 2 might be a good idea, and I'll explain why. One vendor bid, we usually use a vendor bid to either start the bidding or possibly to position a property during an auction. And what I mean by that is that, if the bidding opens at $1 million and it goes to 1 million, 1,050,000, 1.1 and stops, and you have a reserve of 1.3, for example, and the buyers know they have to pay probably 1.2, 1.25. We don't want to leave it at 1.1. So we would use a vendor's bid possibly in that instance at, say, 1.2 or maybe at 1.25. If no one was bidding to start the auction and we had a lot of registered bidders, we would have a low vendor bid. So in that example that I just gave, I might have a vendor's bid of 900,000, but I do it at 900 because I want everyone bidding.
Yeah, okay.
Some owners have reserves that are too high, and they need to see the market bid, and they need to see what the market's prepared to pay to help them make the decision on what the property's actually worth. Other vendors, have a very respectable reserve, and they're realistic on what their aspirations are on selling.
Well, good to know. Yeah,
yeah, it is. It is a fact, and they have a genuinely relatively low reserve. So we often let the market just determine, what it's prepared to pay. But the beauty of auction and vendor bidding, etc. I mean, the beauty of auction is that I believe, or genuinely believe, it's the most transparent way to sell real estate. People get nervous around auctions. They're nervous around bidding, but you can see who you're competing against. In any other form of sale, when you make an offer on a property, the agent rings you up and says, I've got another offer. The first thing the buyer thinks is, you're bullshitting me. That's the first thing a buyer thinks. But in an auction, you can see if there's another offer. Now, at the end of the day, an owner has a price on what they want to sell the property for. There's usually, our studies sort of show on average it's about 3%. They set their reserve about 3% higher than what they actually will sell for.
Okay.
Now that's an average, so it's not the same for every property. The agent's role is to try and bring the buyer and the vendor together to make a decision.
Okay, so then after you do that vendor bid at 1.2 or something like that. no one else bids. You then go back just to the person that's bid the highest bidder, or all parties, or
So if a property's passed into on a vendor's bid, there's no. First of all, it's not a right that any buyer has. If they're the highest bidder, it's generally the agent gives them the first opportunity to negotiate after the auction. That's a courtesy. It's not a legal right in New South Wales. But more often than not, the agent will negotiate with whoever the person is that had the highest bid prior to using the vendor bid. If the vendor bid is the final number and it's passed in, they negotiate with everybody. If somebody bids above that vendor bid and it's still passed in, the agent will negotiate with them in the first instance.
Okay, because my question was going to be, if I know I've had the second highest bid and the real estate agent's calling me, then that tells me that maybe there's room for negotiation because the guy that bidded higher isn't going. Like, there's a bit of room
sometimes,
there, Sometimes.
Look, sometimes, and unfortunately every situation is not the same. So, and every agent tends to work a little bit differently. You know, if you said to me, hey, Damien, this agent, this is what they're doing, I can say, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. But, every agent kind of works a little bit differently.
Well, talking about working a little bit differently, talk to me about a little bit of the tactics or a little bit of the juice that you use, the IP about, body language, extracting bids. You were saying before we jumped on that you go out and get bids. You don't wait for them to happen. And I've seen it as well on the videos and stuff. You're pushing back people that are trying to slow down the auction with smaller bids. Talk to me a little bit about how you get those numbers, how you get those bids and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, look, this is the exciting part of an auction. This is the part that I really live for. This is the part that really excites me on the auction room floor. And it happens almost at every single auction that I do. So, yes, you're right. A strategy of some buyers is to try and slow the bidding down. There are different ways that you can try and slow the auction down. I'm always trying to look to speed the auction up. I get better result if I'm going at speed and volume and I've got momentum. That's what I'm after. So buyers try and do the total opposite of that.
As a buyer, I'm thinking like, when agents do this,
yeah. So it's fun. I enjoy the friendly banter between buyers. I had a guy in the auction room on Tuesday night, that was really trying to slow the bidding down, asking me where was the bid and how much was it, but fortunately for me, there was a lot of buyers on that property. So I was just totally ignoring him. Like I was just running over the top of him. So for me, my strategy to combat that is to look for other buyers. A buyer will get more enjoyment out of that banter if I give the buyer time, if I'm looking them in the eyes, if I'm waiting for them to listen to what they want to say. But when a buyer is saying that to me, I'm not looking at them. I'm looking at someone else and I'm ignoring them. So then they get frustrated because they're not getting what they want. For me, I know that if I'm looking at a purchaser and I'm trying to get a bid out of them, and I can tell whether they're going to give me the bid that I want or whether they're going to try and bring the number down. If I feel like they're going to try and bring the number down, I just look away and I look at another buyer. So it actually stops them. They think they've lost my attention, so then they don't say what they're about to say. So I might be going in 50s and they want to say 10. And I can see, because I can see their mouth is about to say 10. And I'm looking at that's how finite the body language that I'm looking at. Their facial expressions, the way they look at their partner if they have a partner with them, the way they move, where their bidding card is. Are they standing? Are they sitting? Are they watching their competition? Are they sitting right at the front? Are they eager? Are they wearing glasses? Are they not?
Okay, what about buyers agents and stuff too? Because there's a lot of emotion taken out that.
Yeah, no, there is emotion taken out, but even buyers agents have emotion. Look, there are some great buyers agents, and there are others that aren't as good, like any industry, I suppose. Fair. But the reality is that a good buyer's agent should save you money on the auction room floor. A good buyer's agent, if you really want to buy the property, will help you also buy the property. And I think that's one thing that some people get mixed up on, or they're nervous about buying at auction and they actually don't end up buying because they feel like they're trying to negotiate too hard. Whereas sometimes actually just paying a little bit more secures the property for you. So my investment advice to people is that if you like a property and it ticks boxes for you, go and buy it if you can afford to buy it. Don't try and negotiate too hard
and you miss the property.
Yeah.
investment or PPR or both?
Oh, look, I think if you're looking for your principal place of residence, then you should have a lot of the investment rules kind of out the window.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's where you want to live. Yeah. And I always say to people, they say, well, where should I buy? I go, well, where do you want to live? Like, where do you want to live? What street do you want to live in? What way do you want the house to face?
Mm-hmm.
They're the more important factors than what the house is. Yeah. Because I say buy an asset that, ticks those boxes, the street, the aspect, and the suburb. Everything else you can change. And the actual house or the renovation of the apartment is not going up in value. Mm-hmm. It's the land that's going up in value. So the aspect, the suburb, and the street, you can't change those things. Yeah. Everything else you can change.
That's great advice. What are some of the let's talk auction stories? What are some of, you said that one of the tactics that people use to slow down is asking what the number's at and all that kind of stuff. You're just straight out ignoring them. But what are some of is there any successful auction strategies apart from having the highest bid that you've seen are effective and that people have won with? People come in heavy at the start, heavy at the end, $1,000 bids extra, or is there anything that you've seen that has been really successful?
Look, I would say this. I would say that if we were going to auction and I had the same budget as somebody else, I do think that I can outbid them. If I'm going to auction and someone's got a significantly larger budget than me, it's unlikely I'm going to beat them because they've just got more money. So every buyer is different in that sense. I do think that getting involved in the auction is really important. I think getting involved early is really important, particularly if there's a lot of registered bidders. If you can see that you are competing against a lot of people, you want to try and break the backs of most of those buyers early. And so in the example that we spoke about before, we might have the agent might have been guiding 1 million, for example. Mm-hmm. And you can see that there's 7, 8, 10 people that want to buy this home. You're competing against them. I'm not going to start the bidding at 900,000. That's where the auctioneer wants it to start. I want it as an auctioneer. I want it to start at 900. Mm-hmm. But if I'm a buyer, I'm starting that at 1.1 because I want to first of all, I want everybody to know that I'm serious and I mean business. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I want to try and knock out some of the riffraff that might only be there to buy it for 950 to 1,050,000. And then once I've had that opening bid, if somebody bids after me, I don't have to bid a strong number. I don't have to bid another 50,000. I can bid 10 or I can bid 5 or even 1. But it's the speed at which you bid that makes the difference rather than the increment that you're bidding.
Explain that a little bit more.
So if I go 1 million and then someone comes in and goes 1,050,000, right, as the auctioneer, Damien Cooley, I'm going to try and get them to go to 1.1. Mm-hmm. But if you go 10 fast, so you go 50, I go 10, straight away, that's what signifies my strength rather than the amount of money that I'm bidding.
Okay.
Yeah.
You as the other
Me as the other buyer.
So coming back, you go 50, 10.
Yeah,
50,
10.
10.
Correct.
Yeah, I get you.
Yep. So if they're bidding really strong, like in 50s, and you're going 10, and they're rounding you up to 1.1, and then they go, you go 1,110,000, then they go 50, 60. 1.2, 210.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that it's 50 versus 10. It's the speed at which you bid.
Okay.
So the longer a person waits to actually bid, the more confidence it gives to the other person.
Yeah.
Now, some people will try and slow it down. Just wait. Auctioneer goes first, second, third. Doesn't work. There's no.
Are you saying that because you're an auctioneer?
No, there's no. I don't believe there's any advantage by not bidding and waiting to try and crush the hopes of the other buyer. I believe that bidding quickly is better in the buyer's interest. Anytime I've ever bid for anybody, family members, that's the way I've bid.
It's going to sell for the market price anyway, right?
It will.
So it's whether or not you get there and it's a extended blown out auction or if it's like a quick and short fast.
Yep. One good strategy I saw, which when it first happened to me quite a few years ago, I was like, that's a good one.
Yeah.
They was getting towards the end of the auction. And they had their bid. I can't remember the number, but let's just say it was 1,050,000. Mm-hmm. And the previous bidder was like 1,040,000 and might have been going in tens. They went 1,050,000, and you could see that this other bidder was just about to bid. Mm-hmm. They were about it, and then the buyer said, "Make it 60. I'll bid against myself. I just want to own it, make it 60.
Bid. Yeah,
and it was
okay.
the double bid, and it was like the other buy was just like, no way, you can have it. And I thought that was a really cool way just to sort of final nail in the coffin to say, look, I'm happy to pay an extra 10. Now, from the buyer's point of view, the way he would have processed it in his mind is, well, if they go 10 and I have to go another 10, that's 20 grand. But if I just go 10 more now against myself, it's only going to cost me 10 more rather than 20 more.
Wow.
So it was good.
True, yeah. You've actually
You've saved yourself 10 grand.
10 grand, but
maybe.
Going up on that. Okay.
Who knows? But look, he probably had a budget of 1.2, so I didn't care.
All right, great. Well, talk to me a little bit about what's the most expensive house you've sold at auction?
House-wise, 23 million. It was quite a few years ago now.
Okay.
Lachlan Murdoch bought it. It was the old French consulate in Bellevue Hill.
Bellevue Hill.
Yeah, look, at the time it was the Australian record for the highest price for a house. Yep. It's a single dwelling, sold under the hammer. I've sold other properties down in the ACT for over 40 million. But
ACT?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Big blocks of apartments and land development sites on behalf of the Land Development Agency down there. So, yeah, more land sales. I guess more of a commercial type purchase rather than a house. Sydney auction record at the moment, I believe, is just over 25 million. Yeah, I was doing a bit of research on it last week because I've got a few auctions coming up that'll hopefully crack that if they sell.
25 doesn't seem like a...
It's not a lot. It's auction record.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that
sold
because,
under the hammer.
Is that why don't those expensive... Because a lot of them do 20, 30, 40 million. They don't like the auction?
No, a lot of those properties are generally sold by expressions of interest.
Okay.
I say to all the agents, you should be auctioning these properties. There's a lot of buyers and they're like, oh, the owner's private, the owner's this. They don't want people coming through the house, rah. I said it's all about getting the best price. Well, but there's only going to be one buyer at this sort of level. Yep. Who knows? Top end market has been incredibly strong for a number of years. And to be frank, my tip for buyers out there right now, to me, in the last 14 days, feels like the market's starting to improve. Feels like the wheels are really starting to turn. The market was already doing well this year, but I feel like there's a lot more property on the market. Market's handling the volume very well, and things are looking quite positive.
That was going to be my next question. Well, one of my questions is moving into the rest of the year. This interest rates are starting to plateau. We're hearing whispers of cuts and stuff like that. You're on the front line. You go into I'm following you on social, so I'm seeing you do 9 or 10 auctions a weekend or on a Saturday. So what do you see? Yeah, what do you see frontline for the rest of this year? What are you thinking?
Well, we've had a very good February and very good March in terms of the volume of property that's gone to auction. So it was significantly up on last year. We had auctions on Tuesday night. We had 32, I think, booked in on Tuesday night. I physically called 17 auctions on Tuesday night. Wow. Our clearance rate for that was 70%. Across all the auctions booked in. So that was a pretty strong clearance rate. In a boom market, we say a clearance rate is above 80%. We say the market's booming. So a very strong market is 70 to 80%. And I reckon that we're sort of on the cusp of that sort of 70% mark, high 60s, low 70s. But the thing that we're seeing is that some of the auctions, the prices are very strong. One bedroom unit in Coogee the other night, Carrington Road, which is a busier type road. To be honest, it wasn't anything too special.
Car space?
No car space. $1.3 million.
1.3.
Yeah, and they were queuing up for it. And I mean, as an auctioneer, I'm selling this apartment. I'm just going, are you cracking jokes? Are you serious? But look. I don't think like that during the auction, but once the hammer comes down, for me, it's got nothing to do with the property. It's got nothing to do with where it is. It's got everything to do with who the buyers are and what I think they're going to pay.
When you're of a weekend or of a night like that, when you're doing 17 auctions, how are you loading up with the detail? You're getting a quick cheat sheet before the auction to read about the house and that, or like how are you sort of being ready and set up for all of those auctions, 17 back to back?
We communicate with the agents throughout the campaign. Firstly, yes, I do have a sheet of paper for each property that I have my notes on what I think are the more salient points I should mention. Anyone who's been to one of my auctions, I don't say much before the auction starts. Buyers switch off. They don't care what the auctioneer's saying. Going through the terms and conditions of auction, wasting your time talking about the contract. Who cares? Like, cut to the chase, get into it. You know, I don't muck around too much on descriptions. I don't waffle on about the property and tell people how good I am. It's all about the buyers, and it's all about trying to find out what they're prepared to pay. So my introductions are very short. I mean, those 17 auctions we knocked over in 2 hours. They were all done, and we sold a lot of them under the hammer. Some auctions take a bit longer than others. Some auctions are really quick. Depends on the buyers, depends on how quickly I can get them bidding. And that's the strategies that I put in place every auction to extract those bids out of the buyers really quickly. So, but just to answer your question on the cheat sheet you mentioned, so I know what the reserve is before we start. Yep. I have to see that reserve. We've discussed what our vendor bids may or may not be based on the agent's how many registered bidders we have, and based on the conversations the agent has been having with the buyers in the lead up to the auction night. So a good agent will qualify their buyers very well, and they'll have a good idea on what they think the buyers are prepared to pay, and then the auction kind of does its thing from there.
How do you, probably lastly, and to finish up, is you as an auctioneer need to be on the ball to make split decisions, whether to take bids, to knock them back, and all that kind of stuff. That decision making's be made really quick compared to like a private treaty where the agent can think about it and stuff like that. How do you learn? Where do you learn that? How do you come across it? Or like, is that something you taught, or you're like?
Yeah, look, it is difficult to teach. A lot of it is intuition, and I'm getting a couple of grey hairs now, so I call that to my daughter who says I'm getting older. I said, no, that's just experience, darling. And so yeah, look, experience plays a big role. I mean, anything you do more of, you're going to get better at. And you just said we've done 75,000 auctions. I've seen almost every single scenario play out, and I've made the wrong decision in times. You know, I've knocked a buyer back and haven't taken a bid because I wanted a bigger bid and I haven't got it. Yep. Or I've taken a smaller bid and I probably should have pushed that little bit harder for the bigger bid. And they're the things that you just learn, I guess, over the years. When I'm pretty aggressive on the bigger increments, it's usually I'll give buyers a little auctioneer tip. Yeah, here we go. If we're going the golden nugget, if we're at the end of an auction and I know that the underbidder might have one more bid in them, and they're about to stop, I'll get that one more bid from the buyer, and then the person who I think is going to end up being the buyer, I'll try my hardest to convince them to do a big bid. Yeah. So I had this scenario the other day at a property.
See what you're doing.
We were at 2,150,000. The owner was selling. I didn't think that I knew the person at 150 probably had more in them, but I couldn't get another bid out of this other person. Yeah. And after a few minutes, borrowing and stealing, I got this buyer to bid 1,160,000. Yeah. Now the other bidder, who was the confident one,
yep,
he goes 70, and I said no. I said no, don't make it 70, make it 2.2, make it 2.2. And he's like, why would I do that? I go, mate, well, he's at 170. He's at 160. Yeah. If you keep going in tens, mate, you're going to get there. If you go $2.2 million, you've got a better chance of knocking him out right now. Go 2.2. No, I'll go 170. No, just go 2.2. No, why would I do that? I'll be 170. Just make it 2.2. Okay, 2.2. Yeah. So then he bids 2.2. Yeah. First, second, third, sold. Right? So for me, that's my job.
Yeah.
That's what I'm there to do. I'm there to get the best result for the owner. Now, it's almost like 15, 30 seconds of bravery from me to just push. And they say no, and I push. And they say no, and I push. Now, I might get it wrong. I may not get 2.2. Yeah. But in that instance, I did. And then a guy walks up to me as soon as I knock that down. He goes, mate, I'm putting my house on the market in a couple of months' time. You're my auctioneer.
There it is.
To me, that's the power of me doing a great job on auction day. And I have no idea who that person was, and they haven't called me, and they may never call me. Yeah. But the fact that somebody is thinking that means that they saw me do what I believe I do best, and that's get the best result for my owners in the most respectful way to the buyers. But they saw that, and to me, they're going to go and tell people that they saw Damien Cooley do this and they saw Damien Cooley do that. And I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I try my hardest every single auction I do.
Yeah, respect. I usually ask at the end of the podcast a golden nugget or a useful bit of information. You've just said it there. So what I want to end on is, Damien Cooley, what is a quote you live your life by?
A quote I live my life by. Well, when I first got into real estate, I was in property management, and I was in leasing. And I opened up. I had a big long queue of tenants out the door, and these tenants were all lining up. I opened up the door, and a guy tripped on that little metal strip that holds the carpet down.
Yeah.
And he fell flat on his face, and I couldn't help but laugh. And this guy looked around and turned and said to me, he goes, "You never get a second chance to make a first impression." And I've taken that quote through my whole career, and I think that it's about. I think people don't smile enough. Mm-hmm. I think smiling is a wonderful asset, and it's a great thing that builds trust and relationship between you and somebody else. Have a nice firm handshake. Be good to people. Do the right thing by people. Work really hard. And I think what I said at the very beginning of the podcast, my advice to anyone wanting to be better in business is to be better with yourself. If you're better with yourself, being better in business is going to come.
Going to follow. Damien Cooley, thank you so much for jumping on the Everything Property podcast. Appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure.